Hello class, welcome to International Relations lectures, and this is the update for the Constructivist IR lecture, okay? So let's look at this. So in neorealism, we learned Kenneth Waltz is like the main author of neorealist IR, and he's suggesting that the structure of the international system is due to the material distribution of power. Okay, so what is structure? It means, well, Waltz is saying that you have war because of structural issues in the international system. Structure is just due to material power distribution, right? So whenever you see that, there's a distribution of military power, economic power, then we say, oh, so this distribution is resulting in polarities. And then because of these polarities, particular countries like superpowers might be seen. And these are the guys basically who are balancing the power against each other, right? So Wendt is saying, yeah, to an extent, the structure is material, but it's also due to ideas. It's ideational, okay? So he says, look, states perceive threats, but this is due to their histories with one another, right? Or the way they think about politics. And thus, it really ends up due to socialization. So states are going to hate each other if they have bad histories, right? So you look at the English versus the French, you feel there's lots of bad history there. They might not like each other, but these days they're getting along, right? So states have ideologies. They have political ideologies, okay? And see each other as friends or enemies based on such ideologies. So that's why Wendt is saying the whole thing is ideational. Let's look at what some of this means. Ideologically, same nations treat each other as friends. That means if you are in the capitalist world or the liberal democracies, you will see each other as friends, right? And you will make all kinds of security pacts with each other, right? So you have these collective security organizations like NATO, you have Warsaw Pact during the Cold War, which was for the Eastern Bloc. So these nations see each other as friends. They're not going to attack each other. No matter how much the wealth of England goes up, US isn't concerned, okay? However, if you have opposite ideologies, you treat each other as enemies, right? So the capitalist world immediately starts to think of the communist and socialist world as its enemy, competition. This is the main thing happening during the Cold War, right? And what's happening is it's perpetuating. It's like a cycle that perpetuates itself. You have real threats, you have some ideological threats, all of that is happening, right? The perception that the other group is the enemy. So in class, we didn't really talk about capitalism, liberal democracies, communism, and socialism, but you can understand these are different ideologies. We'll cover that later. Islam also could be perceived as an ideology. You have ideologies for religious states or theocracies, right? You can also have many nations which are majority Muslim, but as far as politics, they are secular. They don't have Islam in their constitution as the main source of politics and law, okay? Christianity. Christianity itself had a theocratic system. When you had the Holy Roman Empire, you had the Even when you're looking at England and France, you have eras when, the laws came from religion, or the role of the church was very big in politics, okay? During the medieval era, we see that Islam and Christianity, these were two separate ideologies, and they were competing for, the people in these groups were competing for the rule of Europe, but also the Middle East, right? Resulting in the Crusades. You know that the Almoravid, the people from the North Africa, basically took over Spain for 700 years, right? So Spain was a Muslim country and even went up to France. So there was Muslim rule in Europe for a while, and the result is the Crusades and the Spanish Inquisition, right, of the 16th century. So let's look at what else there is. So constructivism may be used to understand what's happening in the Arab-Israeli world. So the idea that why nations are treating each other as friends and enemies comes from this ideological issue. So if you have countries which have the same faith, majority faith is Christian, then you will act as one community. If you see the Christian states are being attacked, you as a Christian person might think, oh my God, my community is being attacked, right? The same is the situation in the Islamic world. We have been hearing that there is such a thing as an Islamic community of states and peoples. It's an imagined community, much like nationalism, okay? So the Arabic word for community is ummah, and that's why we talk about ummah in this discussion. So sometimes you reject states that are different, right? So whenever there's a political conflict, we take the side of the state that is like us. So we might feel that Muslim states, you can ask that Muslim states have rejected Israel, and is this a fair situation? Did Muslim states ever give a fair chance to Israel? Because they immediately took the side of the Muslim states in the Arab region, which is Palestine in this case, and Jordan and others, right? So on the flip side, you can ask, did Arab states see Israel as an inconvenience to Arab independence movements from the Ottoman Empire? So as you know, that the Ottoman Empire actually falls apart after World War I, right? So around the 1920s, essentially, the Ottoman Empire breaks up. And as it's breaking up, all these regions that were under the Ottoman Empire are suddenly given the opportunity for forming their own states. So the question then is not just opposition to Israel itself or a Jewish state, but to the new kind of imperialism imposed in the Middle East, because these nations can no longer have their own countries, right? They can't form states. Did the Arab states seek independence from Britain and France? Yes, there was also an era of colonialism in Africa and Asia. Israel came out of nowhere, again, mainly European people. So it's viewed as another imperialist state. So there is a sense that Palestine has been wronged, Jordan has been wronged, and so on. Let's look at constructivist prescriptions. How do you have good relations between states? So they're saying to do so, you have to break through these ideological boundaries. You need to, so the US needs to befriend Russia and China. So you saw the era of détente, right? You heard about détente. So you have ping pong diplomacy in the 1970s. Nixon and Zhou Enlai of China, the premier at the time, are able to sit down and have many talks. China then opens up, right, economically. And Mao Zedong is also there, and he's very happy to see this is happening. So Alexander Wendt is famous for saying, anarchy is what you make of it, right? So you don't have a world government, but that doesn't mean you're constantly to be at war with each other, right? So you look at US versus Iran and US versus North Korea. We have seen that always in the media you hear that Iran is up to no good, it's expanding its nuclear capabilities, and North Korea is going around testing its missiles all over the place. So why is this happening? Why is the relationship between US and these nations so bad? So constructivists would say, look at history, look at the material situation, material conditions, and then look at ideas. So some of the problems lie in history. Did the US act fairly towards North Korea or Iran? Has Iran and North Korea done anything to be unfair as well, right? Thus, some problems are material. Did the US try to attack North Korea? Did it split the Korean Peninsula? So the answer to both the questions is yes. The US led a war on North Korea in the 1950s. The US also interfered. The US also interfered in the creation of a Korean state. So you can watch Mr. Sunshine. It's a show on Netflix, and you can get an idea. US also did similar things in Iran. It interfered in the political system. It tried to create a puppet regime with Pahlavi Shah. And of course, the Iranians came back with the Iranian Revolution led by Imam Khomeini. And so you see that the US has interfered, and Iran also had the hostage taking in the 1970s. So all of that perpetuates the problem. So let's stop here and get back to class. We'll see you next time.